Today, I'm excited to be joined by Dr. Lara Barros, an expert in the area of using co-op in the schools. We'll be diving deeper into this topic, including recent research and actionable takeaways you can implement right away. Welcome to Pediatric Pioneers, a MedBridge podcast where we conquer challenging topics for the pediatric therapist through conversations with pioneers who have blazed new trails in our practice. Our aim is to deliver actionable takeaways for practitioners like you. To receive continuing education credit for this episode and access bonus resources, be sure to check out medbridge.com. Hello, I'm your host, Nicole Quint, and I'm an occupational therapist with over 20 years of experience in practice and academia, specializing in pediatric practice and the improvement of occupational participation and performance through my expertise on executive function, visual perception, social emotional learning, sleep, and sensory processing. It is my passion to support pediatric therapists like you so that you can best serve the families under your care with evidence-based practice solutions, easy to implement advocacy approaches, and new ways to lean into your skills within the challenging pediatric landscape. Welcome, Lara.
Hi, Nicole. It's great to be here.
It's wonderful to have you. Could you get us started by sharing a little bit more about yourself and how you became involved with the co-op model?
Sure. I've been an OT for about 32 years and an OT in the schools for 26 of those years. I have my bachelor's, master's, and doctorate in OT. Just couldn't get enough. I work in an educational cooperative, actually, which
Oh,
is,
right.
yeah,
I'm
north
glad
of
you
Chicago.
clarified that because we'll be talking about the co-op model, right?
Yeah, I noticed that when I was saying that. So that was like, that's confusing. So anyway, so really what brought me, how I found co-op is really, I went back to get my OTD in 2018, and I was really looking for a way to, really like, I think like many OTs, I was doing so well with my students at that time I was still pulling kids in the therapy room sometimes
Okay.
and in the classroom, and I knew I was supposed to be embedding, and I was trying to embed, but I wasn't really sure how to do that. So that led me to get my OTD, and then in that process, I learned about co-op, and really ever since then, I've been hooked. Um, I had the
What
Yeah.
hooked you about co-op? I mean, I think you brought up a really interesting there's a couple of things there that are
Mhm.
interesting. I love that when there's a practice problem that you wanted to solve, you went back and got your post-professional doctorate. That's close to my heart. But second of all, you said that you were struggling to know what to do to embed the kids. So what about co-op was the solution to that practice problem for you?
Um, well, there's probably a million things about co-op that was a solution. Because the first thing is my biggest challenge was I was working with a lot of students with emotional, and behavioral challenges, and I was really, really having a hard time trying to figure out how come they could do everything, right? They had every skill, but they couldn't perform. And co-op, was really what I was looking for that because it allows that self-reflection, which we'll talk about later, and helping and a lot more talking with the student. And then the other piece was the generalization because co-op works on generalization and also it collects its own evidence, which we'll find out in a little bit too.
That's pretty cool.
Mhm.
Yeah, I can see where it would be a really good fit for that. So, um, I guess what I should probably have you do now is what is co-op? We're talking about it like everybody knows what it is.
Yeah, so co-op is the cognitive orientation to daily occupational performance. So really, there are five essential elements of co-op. I just want to make sure I get them all in here. I'm so used to talking about it, but I don't always have to give the super duper details. You start with a client chosen goal, which is the student, obviously. So you want to build buy-in and make that goal attainable. So you're not talking about an IEP goal. You're talking about like a small goal, and when they gain that, then they build motivation. We do something called dynamic performance analysis, which is to observe the actual performance of the student doing that actual the whatever their goal task was, and then using the cognitive strategy of goal, plan, do, check to frame your interventions and constantly monitor the effectiveness. And we'll talk a lot about that later. And then also the guided discovery. So instead of telling students what to do or doing things for them, which I think OTs are super, we're so good at setting up everything so that students are successful, you guide them to find out those solutions on their own. And then finally, the enabling principles, which really I think are what every OT is incredible at, which is all the things you're thinking about to keep the students engaged. So you make things fun, you maybe scaffold it a little bit, whatever you do to make sure that the student can rather than doing it for them, can come up to their solution on their own.
So if I'm hearing what you're saying, this is a model, and I know it's a Canadian model,
Mhm.
that really is client-centered or student-centered. It's used if we're talking about it in school setting, but it's client/student-centered. It is occupation-based,
Mhm.
and it really is a way for students to and clients to gain skills, but also gain a self-understanding or self-awareness of their performance levels as they move along.
Yeah, it's really about the learning part of it rather than I always try to say it's not just we don't want just someone just to do the task because that's I mean, in the past I've been really great at like getting a student to do something, but actually learn how to do it is
Yeah,
really what co-op's about.
that's huge. So there's a huge, like, executive function component to this, and we just talked to, Dr. Kara Kaczynski about executive function, so I feel like this lines up really nicely. Um, from what I understand too, is that it has a lot of evidence behind it as well, so it's also an evidence-based approach to
Yes.
kind of check off all these boxes as well.
Yeah, I mean, really, I really personally have a very hard time keeping up with the evidence that's out there. Um, it was originally created for students, or not students, children with developmental coordination disorder
Mhm.
in Canada, and it was really because the founders really weren't, or whoever the founders of the of co-op were really not getting um, the improvements that they were looking for. So they came up with this approach, and that was started with developmental coordination disorder or DCD, and then
Mhm.
really now, if you look for school age children, they've studied it on ADHD, uh, autistic students. Again, more and then morbidity like ADHD and DCD, and also,
Mhm.
and just kind of clumsy, like maybe no diagnosis, but clumsy kind of kids.
Right, or even kids that are more on the dyspraxic, but don't have a DCD kind of
Yes.
diagnosis. Yeah, and I think a lot of people use it, again, with, autistic population, and like you said, any kids that are kind of, have comorbidities. So,
Yeah.
you were talking a little bit about the 5 essential components and then the goal, plan, do, check, which I think some people call it GPDC, right? It has
Yeah.
its own little acronym,
Yes. Yeah.
which is really cool. Um, so when we're talking about co-op, I think because it started with DCD, and I think some people are familiar with it, but I think it's really moved into this tool that a lot of people like to use in the school system. And that's what we're talking about today. And it's not just OTs, by the way. I know some of our speech friends are also using this in the school setting.
Great. That's
So
so exciting to hear.
yeah, I love that, right? So what's important to discuss about co-op in the school setting? Like what questions should we be asking as therapists?
Yeah, well, I guess like the first thing to realize is that chances are you're not going to be able to do the full co-op approach, which is a 10, there's an intervention format, which is 10 45 to an hour long session. So we're kind of thinking that in general, you're doing more kind of like a co-op-ish kind of a thing,
Mhm.
right?
Okay,
So
like a
you're,
modified
excuse me, sorry.
modified co-op
Yeah,
kind
it's
of
kind of
thing?
a little bit
Mhm.
modified, but still sticking, when you're using co-op, you're gonna think of a student and I forgot to say you can use this with students with intellectual disabilities as well.
Oh,
You
yeah.
just need to, or people who as long as somebody can identify a goal, and it could be even just pictures. It could be 3 pictures, that could be fine, and then also, participate in that strategy development part, like, of
Mhm.
what to do. So, really what you need to think about is, I mean, honestly, is just starting with the goal. So, rather than I think in the schools, you often have, teachers come up with a problem, And so once you are thinking more co-op-y, it's easy then to like have the teacher reframe that to be a goal. So rather than like, oh, Johnny has terrible handwriting. Okay, well, like let's pick a time of the day. Let's, where is it impacting him the most? Kind of really helping the teacher kind of
Mm.
first tweak where what that's gonna, what's and what does that mean to look like, and then kind of taking that to Johnny and saying, hey, Johnny, Mrs. Pink is wondering why is whatever you want to say. That's not saying it very well, but would like your handwriting to be neater. What do you think that means, right? So
Mhm.
making sure that that student understands what that goal means as well. 'Cause
Mhm.
I think a lot of times in the school, at least when I'm in a classroom, a lot of times some of the problems really come from a student not really knowing, right? It doesn't matter that the
Oh,
teachers
that's
told
so
them like
true.
50 times, but they don't really understand what that goal is.
Well, that you bring up a really interesting point because I think that happens, and then if the kid doesn't understand and they sort of just ignore it, it looks like they're ignoring it. Let me put it this way, because they don't know what to do.
Yes,
And so then it becomes, well, Johnny's ignoring, or Johnny's being defiant or non-compliant, right? And then the onus goes on the child who really doesn't know what's being asked of him or her.
exactly. I find that all the time. I mean, to be honest, like probably 90% of the times I go into a classroom and someone's not following it just because they didn't really understand.
Right, so I
Um,
think that this is kind of a
yeah.
special opportunity to bridge that gap, if you will. So, I think at one point when we were talking, you had told me a little bit about an application of co-op with a child who's struggling to open their milk, which I think is a common challenge we run into in the schools. So,
Mhm.
what would that look like with co-op breakdown kind of thing?
Yeah, well, that depends on the student, I guess, but
Mhm,
it's what you of course, you would start with is having them, try to open their milk, which, of course, is, like, such an isolated skill, right? It's, like, the hardest thing. So, let's say they're trying to open their milk and they can't do it, and then you could say, "Hey, what's up? What do you how come we can't get this open?" Just it's a lot co-op's a lot of talking rather
mhm,
than so much doing, and then you might guide them. You might even say um wonder if they know how to do it. So if they don't know how to do it, you have to kind of go back and teach them how, so that they understand how it would even happen. And then if not, you might think about, um, opening the milk is a lot of like the pressure, how it's not necessarily stopping and working on, I think traditionally we might stop and work on grip strength. We might work on fine motor skills, but more about guiding the student to understand what kind of pressure they need and which direction the pressure needs to go in.
mhm. Yeah, forced discrimination's not easy. With
No,
you can crush the milk.
yes, it is. It is. Even as an adult, since I don't do it very often,
Right.
it's really not that not the easiest thing. Yeah,
It's so true. Well, I like how you were talking too, and again, I'm thinking about, how we can then interprofessionally work with speech, for the kids that maybe have some kind of an expressive language challenge, but they understand everything, and we can use co-op and kind of have speech help us with engaging them in the dialogue at a level that works for them for co-op. And I could imagine that being a really cool interprofessional opportunity.
that would be great. I have not had that opportunity yet, but I would love to do that. Yeah.
Well, we'll put it out there in the ether and see what happens,
I
right?
know, right? Yeah, that would be great. I mean, I do talk to of course, I always collaborate with a speech therapist, and I think about like asking them how to best cue the student. Rather they're
Mhm.
not necessarily doing it with me, but like, uh,
Mm.
you know what the student if there's cues that I could use, it would be better that they would understand.
Yeah, and I could actually see physical therapy using this as well. If
Hmm.
they have a child that there is having a hard time accessing some of the playground equipment or getting on and off the bus, this could be a really great, or even walking through how to manage and negotiate some of the situations with the wheelchair.
Yeah.
So
No, yeah. I mean, I have a great example of stairs with
ah,
that because I worked with a PT on stairs with a student that we share, and he was able to walk up the stairs, alternating his feet, but down the stairs was always boom, 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 right? And so, we talked about it at first, and he knew what he wanted to do, and he called it big steps, right? He was saying he needed to take big steps, but then when he went to do it, he did exactly what he did before, right?
Mhm.
And we actually ended up guiding him by counting how many times his feet touched versus,
Mhm.
or, how many it took. So if you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you end up with more than just 1, 2, 3, 4. So helping him
Right.
figure out, because he loves numbers. So that's another piece of co-op too. And learning anyway is always trying to attach it to something that they know.
Mhm. Or
So
the
with this kid,
strength.
it's numbers, right? He
Yeah.
loves numbers. So
Right. So it has that strengths-based component. So
yes.
some of the other questions that we might ask therapists that are important regarding co-op, what are some other questions that you would be asking about that? I know you were kind of saying one of them was, what can we be doing to support participation, right?
Yes. Hmm.
What are some other questions that you might have?
Um, I mean, really, that's the biggest one is what can we do to support participation? Because I think, even though we know, from earlier studies, there's a Novak and Honan study, and there's the Grayho study that using working on performance components is not the way to go. That doesn't have
Mm,
an impact on participation. That task oriented approach are really the gold standard, um,
mhm.
and co-op is one of those approaches. So just really thinking about, how are things working for you? I guess the question I have.
Yeah.
Are you getting the results you want, or are you just assuming that a kid's going to be in therapy from like kindergarten to high school? Or do you
Mhm.
have a way to see, if you pick fine motor as your goal area, right? Then you are probably, for many of our kids, they're never going to be let go, right? But if you
Mhm.
pick opening up their milk carton or zipping up their backpack or any of those more participation goals, then you have an outcome that is, first of all, aired in, in participation, but also has an end to it.
Yeah, and it's a strategy that they can use beyond. They can start to kind of layer it in other things because 'cause they're starting to use that self-reflection and self-monitoring.
Yeah, and that's actually built into co-op. I mean, you teach them that, like, before you do goal plan, check. You don't. It's not just. I do think that a lot of therapists, OTs, speech use that as kind of an underlying goal of a session, right? Like a
Mhm.
pattern of a session, but you teach them that ahead of time, and then that you're teaching them this problem solving strategy so that they can go do it. And then part of the check is, let's say, some skills you do have to some skills that you need to be, maybe when you're first learning something, it needs to be quiet, like shoe tying, right? That can be really hard to do in
Mhm.
a crowded hallway, which is when it's mostly going to
Yes.
happen. But you build in that piece where you say, hey, what was this going to look like in a crowded hallway? What could,
Mhm.
maybe part of their plan becomes they need to go, maybe they would go to the side of the hallway, or, just thinking, having them think and engaging them in how that would work.
Well, and that makes sense. Earlier you said this that co-op is generalizable, and it's hitting me now because it's so contextually driven.
Mhm.
So you're having them think about the more challenging contexts, and that's why it's going to be, generalizable, whereas typically if we're working in the quiet room or kind of away from that challenging context, you're gonna hit some barriers.
Yeah, and honestly, Nicole, that's one of the things that really, when I was on my journey of trying to figure out how to embed, right? And
Right.
how to making my services more meaningful, every once in a while I would have a student take their work from exactly what the kids or other kids are doing, and take it to the therapy room because it was quiet. But then I was like, even just doing that makes them have to generalize what they did in that therapy room to the classroom. So you're actually
Yeah.
making it harder for them.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great point. So it sounds like too, like maybe one of the questions we're asking too is, are we using evidence-based approaches? And this definitely would help us to do that.
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of a lot of, well, maybe not a lot, but several research studies out there, or that say that we are, in general, we are not using evidence-based services in the
Mhm.
schools. And I'm not 100% sure why, but I do think that part of it is just like I did. They weren't sure how to do it and not feel like a teacher's assistant or a paraprofessional. But a
Mhm.
recent study, or a recent survey, found that OTs working in an elementary school, like 99% of them, their goals, what they were working on was fine motor versus
Mhm.
more of a participatory approach.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's get into that research because I think it is so important, and we can help therapists by sharing some of the research for co-op and why it's evidence based. Can you give us some of the highlights of those important takeaways from the robust amount of research that's been done on this model?
Yeah. So, really, I did some digging and found some that were the most new, just because I think that is the most exciting. So, in co-op in Japan, some therapist worked and looked at students, kindergarten students, and they called it developmental coordination traits. So,
Mhm.
students who maybe didn't have a diagnosis. But that looked like they might have DCD, and then also with kids with DCD and ADHD, and they had improvement
Mhm.
using co-op with both diagnoses, which was amazing. And
Mhm.
then in Canada, and I think I love this one because I think a lot of people might be afraid to use it for kids with multiple diagnoses, right? But
Mhm.
this one is using with autistic students and development, and they also had developmental coordination disorder.
Mm.
But they did make sure they didn't use students with intellectual disability in this one to kind of
Okay.
muddy it. So they were autistic and DCD, and they had a control group because in Canada, a lot of places they have wait lists in schools. So they used
Mm.
that as a group, and they found improvements in the self-rated performance by the Canadian Occupational Performance Measure, or the COPM,
On
which is
COPM?
something we use. It's an outcome measure that is used in co-op,
Mhm.
um, and improved motor quality, right? Which was rated by the therapist, but not the therapist that were treating them, but by a blinded therapist. So I think that's pretty powerful stuff
Mhm.
there. And then also in Turkey, there was therapist who worked on goal directed training and co-op, and these were with students with or children with cerebral palsy, and the co-op group had stronger results. And there again, they looked at the COPM with the performance and satisfaction with performance. So, I
Right.
mean, I think that's the one nice thing. I'm sorry, I probably cut you off. Is like with co-op is you use the COPM, which is an actual outcome measure, right? It
Mhm.
actually you use it to evaluate, and then you can use it again to show change in performance,
Mhm.
perceived performance by the student, and then satisfaction with performance, which we know sometimes, even if some people are never going to do anything perfect, right? But maybe they feel more satisfied with their doing it, and also something called the performance quality rating scale, which is the PQRS, and that's
Mhm.
something where how the therapist rates on a scale from
Okay.
1 to 10, with 10 being kind of the ideal performance, and you do that pre and post as well, or throughout.
So right now I'm kind of imagining listeners kind of thinking, "Oh, I know the COPM and I never thought to use it with children."
Yeah, you can use it with
Right?
students 8 and up. Yeah,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
there's a nice, I mean, I always use it with like a daily schedule kind of a thing with pictures, like breakfast and, just to help them get going, and off, even
Mhm.
though we might not necessarily worry about at the schools, we might not worry about before school, we might not, it helps getting the kids talking. And it's
Yeah,
and
and you
it's
can modify it. You could
yes,
make it have symbols instead of
yes,
reading it and things like that and make it more, kid friendly.
yes.
Are
And
any
you
of those studies that you just talked about? Because it sounds like not it's a lot of research, but there's a lot kind of all over the world, which is really cool. Are any of them systematic reviews?
Um, the ones that were, that talk about, Greyhoe and all, and this is not necessarily with talking about co-op, and
Mhm.
Novak and Honan, those were systematic reviews, and those are the ones that, those 2 were systematic reviews, and they were talking about, goal-directed,
Oh, being the
task-oriented
gold
approaches.
standard.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So, there's tons of systematic reviews based off of a task-oriented approach being
Yeah, and
the
I
way to
think that's
go.
really important to talk about that it is the gold standard because, again, we wanna support OTs and speech therapists and physical therapists working with children to use evidence-based approaches. So let's talk a little bit about translating that research into school-based practice.
Mhm.
So are there certain we kinda talked about this, there's certain kiddos that lend themselves to this model. You talked about DCD, there was some research about autism, research about cerebral palsy. Is there I'm gonna flip it a little bit because normally I say, "Who's it most appropriate for?" Is there anyone it wouldn't be appropriate for?
Yeah, it's really not appropriate for people or for students who can't participate in the goal setting process. So
Okay.
you couldn't call it co-op, right? If they can't
Right.
participate. And also, um, the other powerful thing, elements of co-op are that you have the student or anybody um, identify what the barriers to reaching their goal are, and also some develop strategies. So you can have students if they can point, like choose between strategies to try, but if they are, but if they have, if they can't participate like fully, then you can't call that co-op.
Okay. That
Yeah.
seems fair. I can see that being a challenge, but it seems like a lot of kids can use this and be successful
Hmm.
even with some slight modifications to
Yes.
it. Mhm.
And quite honestly, like when a student can't do it, sometimes I'll use kind of the same framework with the teacher just to help them see, because
Mm.
I think, once you really trust your OT or speech instinct and just, really trust your observations, then you can help the teacher see what the breakdowns are.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're really saying to consider using it with the teacher and teaching them the steps and almost helping them to start to problem solve with the students.
Hmm.
Okay,
Yeah,
this is
I
a
use
big deal.
no,
You just
it's
kind of put this
huge.
out there, I love it.
Yeah, I have some examples, of using it with whole class as well. And
Yeah.
I do, I do when obviously, another part about co-op is that it's not in isolation, right? They, so you do this goal, you choose a goal, you write a plan with the student, through the problem solving process. You do it, and in order to do it, you have to leave it with people, right? You have to leave this
Mhm.
plan with the teacher, you email it, take a picture of it, whatever you need to do, and then the student follows it. And so then you check. You need a trusted adult as well. So it's not like
Mhm.
OT is like I might be in a school twice a week, but you want somebody who's going to be there all the time to be able to kinda check back with you.
Right. No, I
Yeah.
love this because I also see it almost like empowering teachers to start to look at to me, I almost feel like it's gonna help them help the kids, so it's gonna reframe how they're looking at them. I also see, like you said, the whole class-wide opportunity, but I could see this working with parents as well.
Mhm.
So teaching the parents how to do it,
Yeah.
and again, that's just opening up so many opportunities for that family.
Yes, it absolutely is. It does, and I could share a quick, teacher, like, classroom one. Want me to do it
Oh,
now?
that'd be great,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, so, I had a student, 3rd grader, and he did not want to be singled out whatsoever, right? So,
Mm.
he had a
Mhm.
lot of organizational challenges, and, of course, we know that if anyone's ever been in a 3rd grade classroom, he was not alone in having organizational challenges, right? So, to the best of the teacher's ability, who was super organized and super, clear with the students, what we did is I just came in, one day, and we just talked about, why, uh what is the goal, right? Like, how do we do this? Like, Miss Smith is always saying, put your stuff away, but like, why do we do that? Like, what is the goal? And so the students they love to participate. They're all raising their hands. Even that student who didn't want to be singled out, he's raising his hand and saying, and then once they identify that it's really the real goal for putting your stuff away, right? Is so that you can find it again, right?
Right,
So when Miss Smith asks, pull out your math, you can find it. So then the goal becomes for the class that you'll be able to find your work in, whatever time. I don't even think we put a time, but you'll be able to find your work when Miss Smith asks you to bring it out. And so then then we talk. we like brainstorm as a class, like, how will that happen? I mean, how could we possibly find something again, right? And of course, they come up with the same stuff that Miss Smith has been saying all year, but it's but it's their strategy, right? It's their
Right.
solution. And then you also, the thing I love about doing stuff whole class and embedding is that then you also have, 20 something other peer models, right? So
Right.
or peer coaches even, right? Like, hey,
Uh-huh.
Johnny, don't forget to put that in your math thing. We want to find it again. So
Right.
that's the other powerful thing about doing something whole group.
Oh, I love that, and I
Yeah.
I can just picture the kids getting so excited, but how
Mhm.
validating for the teacher.
I know.
She knows they've heard her at some point,
Yes.
and they're pulling
Yes.
that out, but,
Yes.
maybe they hadn't used it before, and now they are.
Yeah. No, it's funny how sometimes you're just like, okay, it's not like what I've said that for like 3 months already, right? but
Yeah.
but it
Right.
is, it is more motivating when it's your solution, right?
Of
I mean, you can
course,
all
yeah.
everyone I think everyone can think back to a time where someone told them how to do something like 100 times and they never got it. But once they sat down and figured it out themselves, they like never
Mhm.
forgot it, right?
Yeah, and I'm thinking about we know that problem solving is directly linked to confidence,
Mhm.
self-confidence, which can lead to self-esteem, and not the kind of artificial self-esteem we used to build with worksheets and stuff, but like real like self-efficacy, knowing I
Mhm.
can do something. And I think that is very powerful in this model. And I think that's really special with our kids that we treat in occupational therapy or speech or PT that we know um, have had to deal with a lot,
Yes.
and take a hit to their confidence because especially if you have, any kind of DCD, your body almost like doesn't do what you want it to do. So that's not really confidence inducing, you know?
Right. And again, that's another thing that those students with those emotional and behavioral challenges, right? They are
Mhm.
always being told, like people are sitting in
Yeah.
rooms making up elaborate behavioral plans for them and sticker charts and all these things, and they are so left out of the process often, right? So
Mhm.
again, it is powering for them to set their own goal and for them to kind of see that they can reach it because like you said, like whether you have DCD, ADHD, oftentimes these the goals that are set for you are not, they're like not a they aren't going to be reached quickly, right?
Right.
They're going to take time and
Right.
you're going to lose your motivation. But if you set small attainable goals and you get it, and then that just helps build that internal motivation.
Yeah, and we know change behavior tells us it's celebrate the small wins, right? So
Yes.
that's helpful. Well, let's go ahead. You've kind of been giving little snippets of what this looks like, but I think it would be really helpful to walk people through what it looks like from the beginning to the kind of or through the process, right?
Mhm.
So, like, could you share what it would look like in a therapy session, including like the evaluation, maybe with the COPM and the intervention?
Yeah. So if you start with a COPM or, I mean, really, you could use anything, but I think the COPM is great because you can use it, you can actually use those numbers. Um, you just, it doesn't mean you have to have a freewheeling conversation, right? You already know, in the schools, we have this incredible possibility of talking to teachers and the people around them. So you kind of have an idea of where they're struggling already.
Mhm.
Not everybody wants to talk about where they struggle, right? But you can kind of guide them in there. So you would talk about like, hey, I hear you've been having a hard time bringing everything. It depends on the student. This is another thing. Like you might be able to say that to some student, but another student you can't
Mhm.
say that to, right? But you say like, hey, um, Miss Jones is saying that like you keep forgetting your folder in the morning. Like what's going on? Like what is that true? Like however you want to do it, but it would have to meet that. I mean, it has to meet the student where they're at, right? So with one student, you might do that. Another student, you might be less directed with them and say like, hey, like, oops, where's your folder? And then just help them do it. So not so like the first one sounded a little judgmental, which I probably wouldn't be so judgmental, but hey, where is it? Oh my gosh, how can we remember to bring it in? Right. So sometimes it's
Mhm.
that simple. Um,
Okay.
and then but you're helping them figure out how to bring it in. So you
Mhm.
have this goal, like we know that Miss Jones needs you to bring this in. how could we remember? Like what's that going to look like? So anyway, I'm jumping ahead. So you set this goal, and then really it has to be something that they want to do, are expected
Mhm.
to do, or that they need to do. So it would be, really almost anything in the school that they can't do, right? And then you part of them with them to guide what went wrong. So let's say it happens to be shoe tying, right? So let's say it's shoe tying, and the student, they want to tie their shoes, but you know, um, I'm thinking of a student I had with ADHD, right? And he wants to tie his shoes, but he is looking anywhere but his shoes, right?
Mhm.
We know
Mhm.
particularly that shoe tying, when you're learning, you have to look at it, right? So
Right.
anyway, so um, so helping them see, and that might be acting out something ridiculous, like, hey, let me tie my shoe, and then like, oh my gosh, why is it not working? Because you're looking everywhere else but your shoe. Or it might be like, hey, I know if you're gonna tie that shoe, everybody I know who ties their shoe looks at their shoe. You can,
Mhm.
you kind of give them cues based off of, you can give them like supplemental knowledge,
Mhm.
right? To say like, "Hey, if you wanna do it, you're gonna have to look at it." Or you might be, like I said, be ridiculous. Like, kids love it when you're ridiculous, right?
Oh, yes, they
Yeah,
do.
they absolutely love it. So you guide them to what's going wrong, and then you say like, "Well, what could we do about that?" So then they're coming up with a strategy. So, let's see. That strategy, like, is probably gonna be, I wonder if it will help, if I look at it, right? And so, and it's makes it less personal, I think a lot of times with, shoe tying particularly, because that's a very you it's not you like it's a very frustrating thing, especially if you're, like, in 3rd, 4th grade and you've been trying for years and you can't do it. So I might say,
Mhm.
"Oh, I wonder if that'll help if I look at my shoe," and then, of course, you do it, and then, you might end up with other breakdowns later, but you do one at a time. Right? So
Mhm.
he's not gonna be able to figure out what his other breakdowns are if he's not looking.
Right. And I think it sounds to me like you layer in other gold standard approaches like motor learning approaches or whatever
Mhm,
you need to do, which if he's at the cognitive level of motor learning, he's got to look at what he's doing. So
mhm.
it allows you to then layer things in, or maybe there was a sensory thing and you've got to do that, or maybe it's positional or whatever it is. So it sounds to me like it is a great framework to then allow you to layer in other things that are necessary to be successful.
Absolutely, yeah, that's what I like about it too, is, like, no 2 plans or no 2 guidings are ever gonna look alike.
Mhm.
So, yeah, you're gonna come in with your knowledge and your experience and what you know works for you, and I'm gonna come in with a difference, hopefully some of the same things, right? Because,
Right.
but your own little kinda bend on it, yeah.
So where does the goal, plan, do, check come into play in this
Okay.
example?
So first you teach that, right? So you teach the goal, plan, do, check. And I like to use usually, hey, like being an investigator or a detective, right? We have this goal. How are we going to figure out how to do this? Whatever works for a student.
Mhm,
So you teach them goal, plan, do, check. And then you set the goal and you make sure it's attainable. So what is that going to look like? Like you're not going to be like, it's not going to be write a paragraph. It's going to be, I'm going to write a sentence so that, and Mrs. Jones is going to be able to read it easily. So it's going to be
mhm,
something like that, something attainable. And then you're going to problem solve and create a plan. That plan is going to be whatever the student needs. Um, like I had a student with that who ended up with a plan that was letters stay together, words go apart. Right? So
mm,
that's how it worked in his
the
head to remind
distinction.
him to leave those spaces, right? Because he was leaving
Mhm,
equal spaces between everything. So they come up with a plan, and then that's followed. It might be written on a sticky note on there, however you wanna do it, but you keep it there and you make sure the teacher knows too so that they're reinforcing it. You do it, and then you check back, like, and you say, "Hey, is that working for you? How's it going?" And then they show you, and usually it's a big smile, right? Or maybe sometimes it's like, I mean, that's a very attainable goal, right? Like to write one
right,
sentence. But like if it's longer, then you're like, okay, is there something we need to do to change it? Because it's an iterative process. It's not, you don't just make that plan and then you stick with it. So you do it, you check, And then you teach the child to self-reflect. Hey,
Right.
did you meet your goal? No. Okay. Did you follow the plan? Well, sometimes they didn't follow the plan. So then we can talk about, okay, well, how would it be easier to follow the plan? Or they did and it didn't work. So you just have to, you just have
And then
to
we kind of start back at it, right? Come up with a
restart.
new
Yeah.
plan.
Yep. We just start again. And it's teaching them, I guess, grit, right? Too. Like
Yeah.
we can, like,
And that's important.
yeah, it's okay. We didn't get it. What do we need to do this time? What's different? Maybe
Yeah.
it was much different. Like maybe it was a rough day, right? And maybe we need to add some things in there for when it's a really rough day.
Yeah, that's a great point. So thank you, because that was really helpful to kind of help to imagine how this works. So, what do we need if we're using the co-op to consider when it comes to the perspectives of the other interest holders, such as clients, parents? We were even talking about involving them, teachers, or other care providers like our interprofessional friends, or if we're dealing with special ed director. Are there some talking points or some word choices or strategies you would suggest that could get us some buy-in with these folks? Because I'm thinking of that whole class example that you gave, and I really feel like more of that would be great. But I think some OTs might struggle with how to kind of sell that.
Okay. Yeah. I have always just walked somebody through the process, right? And I think um I do have some teachers, right? Who I don't know why I put that in quotes, but I have some teachers who are kind of like were my guinea pigs when I first started, who
Uh-huh.
are happy to talk about it with other teachers, which is helpful. So if you start kind of small with teachers who are willing, then you might be able to get buy-in from some who are not
Uh-huh.
so willing. And I think you just talk about that. I mean, executive functioning is the biggest buzzword right now, right? So, I mean,
Okay.
if you just talk about how it impacts, how it's actually, it's teaching executive functioning. It's actually been studied, and I don't,
Uh-huh.
it's been studied as an executive functioning, with an outcome of executive functioning too.
Right.
So, um, I mean, it's just about showing, and then I'm trying to think. Like sometimes I'll bring the plans in for students,
Okay.
which is helpful as well. I think is just for people because it is. I mean, it sounds simple, right? Oh, just set a goal, make a plan, do it, and check it. It sounds really simple, but it's more challenging than I'm making it sound probably. But I think it's just starting with those people who are willing participants, and then kind of spreading out from there.
Yeah. Do you recommend that? I know you took some advanced courses on using co-op. Do you recommend that to OTs or anyone who wants to use this? Or do you think people can just kind of pick it up just from learning about it and reading about it?
I think it would be very helpful to take the 2-day course. It's a 2-day course that then comes with a half day consolidation day where you kind of
Mm.
check in to see how it's going. I
Mhm.
do think it is. I mean, I think if you want to do it well, right? So, and when after I took that course, it just opened up so many more questions for me.
Mm.
So, I sometimes have a hard time because I kind of get stuck in kind of the interest part of co-op is itself and then the doing too, right? The talking about it and all the points, and the doing. But I do suggest that would be a great way to learn more and to really get started.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think if you're school-based, it's really important to know how to do this and integrate it into your bag of tricks, but kind of almost like have it be the framework of so much of what you do.
Yeah. And because I think even if you don't, I mean, just picking one thing. So even just starting, maybe you're not ready to guide somebody yet, right? So even
Mhm.
if you pick a goal even if you're writing the plan, right? You can write the
Mhm.
plan, and then it's a great way to even do consultation, right? So,
Right.
hey, this is the goal. Here's the plan for doing that. Try it out, and then check back with them.
Mhm.
It works for RTI, response to intervention. So
Right.
really like, hey, this student, it's usually a handwriting kid that I, at least most of my RTI kids have always been a handwriting kid. And so it's like, you can just kind of pick this very specific goal, which is what they come for anyway. Right.
Right.
And then, and the kids usually they respond very quickly. Because when you're doing
Yeah.
something like handwriting, you don't just it's not just practice, it's like helping figure out like what's going on here. Like Are they writing too big? Like helping them understand what the line is for and how you could make fit. Sometimes you have to be as direct as like, hey, you have to start that pencil like right under and stop right right on it if it's going to fit. So
Yeah.
um, anyway, or which direction, right? A lot of
Yeah.
it's reversals as well.
I really like too how I think about so many kids that are just kind of told what to do, and now all of a sudden they're integrated and collaborated with, and I think that that is a huge game changer for the kids
Yes. And
and huge
especially,
buy-in.
yes, no, it is. And also, the other thing I haven't mentioned yet is the language, right? So many
Uh-huh.
of the students I work with have English as a second language, or they're exposed to multiple
Oh,
languages,
right.
or they
Mhm.
have language disorders, right? So
Okay.
sometimes, like, so you're saying like go down and they don't even understand what, what down is,
Oh, right,
right? So,
right, right.
it could be as basic as that or just so part of co-op is actually that the students write it in their own words, right? So you hear what
I
their
love
cues
that.
are and then you write it down in their words. And I had a student, I couldn't find the plan, but I had a student who really struggled. He was a third grader, tying his shoes. And I really was trying to find that plan for you because it really didn't move. I don't think it would make sense to anybody else, but
Uh-huh.
he could do it when he left he left class and then he couldn't do it and then he didn't. And then like one day he like came in and he could tie his shoes and he was like, I was thinking about it last night and it all makes sense. So when it's in their own words, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that I love that part of it.
Yeah.
So, let's talk about actionable takeaways. We promised that to our listeners. So, talking maximum impact, what would be your top 3 actionable takeaways for, therapists to use the co-op in practice?
Yeah. Well, the first one I say is start with a goal, right? So don't sit there and don't worry about getting like the visual motor scores or, all those scores. Start with a goal, start with a participation, occupation face or focused goal, um, and have the student put it into their own words so that they understand it and they
Mhm.
know they know what you're talking about. And then the other, if you're not ready for that, I do also think that it could be just even when you're walking into a kindergarten classroom and you notice someone's not doing it, say like, hey, what do you need to be doing? Because sometimes even just having them think about what the goal is, it's not a performance problem. They just weren't sure what the goal was. So
Right.
really focusing on goal, right? On the participation piece.
Okay.
Yeah. And then another one I have is guide, don't tell. So instead of saying, put your hand on that paper so it doesn't slide, like you might you might write and have your paper move all over the place, or you might have them look at someone else's paper and see how they're holding it. But just like, how come that paper's moving? Like, what could we do about that kind of stuff? So guiding them would be is another thing. Or like if you're using scissors, like a lot of kids use it upside down, just kind of instead of just like taking the scissors out and sticking them, like helping them understand which fingers go in which holes. Um, and then, of course, don't forget the student in the check. So, really always helping the student to monitor and check to see what is working. So, you are not just saying, hey, that's not working, but you're saying, like, is this working? Are you able to cut? And of course, sometimes they can, right? But
Mhm.
but that's okay. You don't have to fight every battle right away, right? Because I
Mhm.
sometimes I have kids holding them and they're like cutting, and you're like, oh, yep, they can cut. So we'll have to think of something else. Yeah.
Yeah, that's helpful. So now we have the 3 things for them to think about, the goal, the guide, and then don't forget the check. I love that.
Mhm.
So, we kinda went through some examples earlier. You even had, like, the individual examples and the class examples. So, I think now it's just everybody kinda think about how they could integrate this into their classroom setting, or if they do work in the therapy clinic or hospital, how they could or home health, integrate it there. So, before we wrap up, I I wanted to just give you one more question.
Uh-huh.
What do you think is the next frontier in pediatric therapy, or like we could say more specifically school-based OT, that our listeners should be on the lookout for?
Okay. Well, this is maybe a bit of a dream, but I really hope that we are looking out for administrators that see the value of OTs and speech therapists, particularly in the school, as more than people professionals who are fulfilling minutes on an IEP. So we have a more broader um, impact on the school environment and learning and how to help students learn and participate better. I absolutely have worked with so many great, I don't, I want to make sure, like so many great principals who absolutely understand and appreciate us, but it doesn't always get to the higher ups, right?
Mm-hmm.
So just that piece of that. And then really, I do have a dream, and I have that school-based OTs will really start to be occupation focused and client centered, and that obviously co-op worked for me if there's something else for you. But I really do hope that we have more OTs and speech therapists as well, working within a top-down approach, right? So that
Mm-hmm.
really that it's not we're not working on performance components, that we're actually working on the actual participation goal.
Yeah, and I love that. And I think, we've talked with Dr. Wendy Staub about occupation-based practice. We're talking with you about co-op, and we've been talking a lot about, kind of these bigger initiatives. We talked to Susan Basic about her Every Moment Counts, and I think your dream is a lot of our dream of that. Can we get everyone to see what OT is capable of on
Mhm.
a larger scale? And I think hearing you today, co-op has a lot of promise with that, because you could do the classroom RTI, you can help the teachers, you could help administrators. I just see so many opportunities there that could help with your dream. So thank you for putting your dream out there, because I think it's one that's really important,
Okay.
and I
Perfect.
hope it's achievable.
I think
Right?
so. I hope so.
Yeah, we have to put it out there for sure. Well, thank you so much. That's all that we have time for today. I want to say thanks again to Dr. Lara Barros for her insight and her practice related takeaways to the co-op model, which, by the way, we never really said who the authors were of the co-op model.
Oh,
We
yes. Okay.
probably should give them credit, right?
Yes, we absolutely should. I know it's in the resources, but
It is. It is.
Dr. Helen Politaico, sorry, and another big name in a co-op is Rose Martini. So
Okay.
and of course it is out of Canada, but yes, they're amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought about that. I'm like, we've been talking, we didn't give our th- uh, give the people who created this their due. So I'm glad that we finished on that note. So
Yeah.
thank you so much,
Mhm.
and we will be seeing everyone next time. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Pediatric Pioneers by MedBridge. Please be sure to subscribe and listen to more of our episodes on Spotify or on your favorite podcast platform, and at medbridge.com. If you're listening outside of the MedBridge catalog and would like to access the bonus resources and receive continuing education credit, simply log into your MedBridge account and complete the quiz for this episode. Pediatric Pioneers also listens to you. If there's a particular practitioner that you'd like to hear from, or if you have a question or challenge that you'd like to explore on this podcast, please let us know by leaving a comment on our Instagram post or by emailing podcasts@medbridge.com.